Like all Jewish holidays, and frankly, all holidays in general, there are so many memories that I'm sure we all have. Those of us who were brought up with Hanukkah, we have so many memories, don't we? And I can just sort of close my eyes and see these big family gatherings with 10, 15 Hanukkiot, different Hanukkah menorahs all burning brightly with the candles, with the smell of latkes frying in the background and the taste of those jam donuts, as we call them in England. By the way, English jam donuts are better than American ones, in my view, as are my mother's latkes. But those memories, the smells, the taste, the sights, and Hanukkah, as I said, is so much about what we see. I shared earlier a teaching by the Kedushat Levi, the Hasidic rabbi, who says that Hanukkah is about raya, about seeing, because we see the candles, and I'm going to say more about that. Purim's about hearing, because we hear the story of the Megillah. And Pesach's about ma'aseh, about action, because we eat matzah. But of course we eat other things on Hanukkah, like the latkes and aforementioned donuts, sufganiyot. But there's something about visual memory that I think is very, very powerful. And we all have our different associations with Hanukkah. For some of us, Hanukkah is about presents. For some of us, Hanukkah is about family gatherings. But the central piece of Hanukkah, of course, is that lighting of the Hanukkah candles. And the tradition that they are lit so that they're going out into the world. That's the mitzvah. In fact, the Talmud says that they should really be outside your house, outside in the street, on the opposite side of the door to your mezuzah. So you have the mezuzah, which is this symbol of faith and protection coming inside the house, and the light of the Hanukkah candles going outside into the world. And it's this phenomenal kind of dual symbol. Not many of us do that, but if you go into certain religious neighborhoods in Jerusalem, like Mea Sharim and Geula and other places, as I have done during Hanukkah, you will see outside almost every home these big glass boxes with brass and glass, and inside the Chanukiah that are lit inside the glass to stop the wind blowing them out, and they are indeed outside the homes. The sources say that if they can't be outside, they can be in a window going into the most public part of the what they call Reshut HaRabim, the public space. The idea is that we light candles in private space, but they go out into the public space, and it's all for Pesume Nisa. The rabbis tell us Pesume Nisa, Aramaic for the Hebrew, which is lefasem et hanes, which is about publicizing the miracle. Publicizing the miracle, as if to say, we're here, a miracle happened, and a miracle is still happening, and we're lighting the candles this year in spite of everything, we're here. And then there's all of the other traditions that we know about lighting Hanukkah candles. It actually says that the requirement is one candle per night per household. But none of us do that, right? And then the Talmud says in Masechet Shabbat, in the tractate on Shabbat, because there's no separate tractate on Hanukkah, and all of the teachings of Hanukkah actually are in the part of the Talmud that talks about Shabbat, where it asks the question, my Hanukkah, what is Hanukkah? And then it says, Zot Hanukkah, this is Hanukkah, and it tells the story of the miracle of the oil, and then it goes through all of these different ways that we observe the holiday, and it says Mahadrin, the sort of to make the mitzvah beautiful, you have one candle per member of the household per night. And then you say, Mahadrin, to make the mitzvah really, really beautiful, you have one light and you increase the light, according to Hillel, of course, and many of us are familiar with this discussion, that according to Hillel, you light one candle on the first night and you increase to 8, and Shammai says, no, you start with 8 and you reduce to 1, and there's a whole beautiful philosophical argument about what it's like to just have the miracle be all 8 candles at once and you reduce it, or to start with the small light and increase it. And I'm not going to get into that argument, because if you're not familiar with that argument, maybe think for yourselves what the the spiritual and psychological and emotional even difference might be between increasing and decreasing the light each night of Hanukkah. And I know some of you, and Reb Zalman of blessed memory used to always have on either side of his door, his front door, 2 electric menorahs, one according to Hillel and one according to Shammai. And I actually saw Eve, Robertson Eve, the other day, and she said she still does that tradition Ada Yom Hazeh to this day, which is lovely. It's a powerful tradition because Hillel and Shammai, apart from anything else, represent, and this was really in some ways the theme of my Devar Torah, my words last week, Hillel and Shammai represent Machloket L'Shem Shemayim. They represent dispute for the sake of heaven, and so you honor both sides of the argument by having both there, but you also, on a deeper level, you're honoring this idea that there is value to increasing and there is value to decreasing when it comes to the light of Hanukkah. So we have our traditions, we have our memories, we have the visual memories, we have the olfactory memories of the smell. I mean, the sense of smell, of course, is such a powerful one. We say all these different blessings for smell, primarily at Havdalah at the end of Shabbat, but so many of the holidays are about the smells, and if I close my eyes and breathe in through my nostrils, I can practically smell my mother's latkes frying in the pan. And I'm grateful that I didn't fry latkes this year, but I was able to purchase some latkes from Jessica, who made them here at Bonai Shalom's kitchen. They were delicious. They are delicious. I still have some of them left. But the visual memory is what I want to talk about a little more, because the tradition is after we light the Hanukkah candles, we have this passage that many of us say, which is a very powerful passage. And it says, Hanerot halalu anu madlichim ala nisim v'ala niflaot v'ala teshuot v'ala milchamot. These candles, we're lighting them for the miracles and for the wonders and for the ways in which we've been saved and for the wars that we've won, that happened for us in the past and perhaps in the present and the future. Al yedei kohanecha hakadoshim, through the means, through the hands of the holy kohanim, the holy priests. And then it says, Hanerot halalu kodeshem. These candles are sanctified, holy, special. Ve'ein lanu reshut lishtamesh bahem, ela lirotam bilvad. And we don't have the authority, we don't have the right, we don't have permission lehishtamesh bahem, to use them. Ela lirotam bilvad, only to see them. Mitzvah of seeing, right? Visual memory. These lights are not utilitarian. We can't use the light traditionally to read by or to count money or to do our business, to check our email. If we need light to do a particular activity, whatever that activity is, even if it's a spiritual activity, we're not using the light, which you can do, by the way, with Shabbat candles. Ela lirotam bilvad, but just to see them. And it continues on, Kadei lahodot lahalel l'shimcha hagadol al nisecha va'al yeshuatecha va'al niflotecha. We see them, we reflect on their light, we allow the light to reflect inside us in order that we might acknowledge lahodot, and that's an important word that I'm going to come back to, lahodot ulahalel, to acknowledge, to praise, to thank, to praise, lahalel, like the Hallel psalms that we sang, l'shimcha gadol, for God's great name, al nisecha v'al yeshuatecha v'al niflotecha, for the miracles and the salvations and the wondrous things. That's what the passage says after we light the Hanukkah candles. And some people in mystical and Hasidic realms see it as an invitation to really meditate on the candle flames. Not to use the candle flames for some external physical purpose, but to look at the candle flames and allow the flame to reflect our own neshama, our own soul, because the Sfat Emet, the Hasidic commentator, says that Ner, Candle stands for nefesh, ruach, which are two of the levels of the human soul. And by reflecting and seeing the candles, we're reflecting on our own soul, the own imprint of our soul. That's one way to understand it. Another way to understand it is just about presence. Sometimes we do something in order to do something else. And the Hanukkah candles are just, we do them for the sake of doing them, for the sake of the mitzvah, for the sake of publicizing the miracle, for the sake of being present with those Hanukkah candles. We don't just light the Hanukkah candles and then immediately get on with something else and use the light of the Hanukkah candles to do that something else. We stop. We stop. And we appreciate. And we allow ourselves to be filled with the narratives of wonder, with the miraculous ways in which we've been brought to this moment, even now in 2020, in this Hanukkah of 5781, which is probably going to be very different as we think of those visual memories that I invited you into. Most of us, many of us, are not having those same memories this year. Some of us might be connecting to family members via Zoom for Hanukkah candle lightings, but many of us are lighting candles on our own or in very small clusters and groups in our pods. And so it's different. It's very, very different. And yet, it is still a source of blessing and wonder. Whatever is going on in this world, and it's hard, and we know that the reality of this winter and this continuing pandemic, as much as there are very hopeful signs for a vaccination and for returning to normal, summer, fall, whenever it might be, predictions say, but we're still here. We're still in this. And it's hard and it's painful and it's lonely and it's frightening. And yet there are miracles every day. That's what our tradition tells us. The Modim prayer, which is at the end of every single Amidah, whether it's a weekday Amidah or a Shabbat Amidah or a festival Amidah, the Modim prayer that says, we are grateful and we bow down and we acknowledge you. And it says, V'anisecha shebechol yom imanu, for the miracles that are with us every single day. Nisecha shebechol yom imanu, v'niflotecha v'tovotecha, shebechol eit sarah v'tzuka, that are with us every moment, every morning, every evening, every afternoon, these miracles. And so the idea of a miracle in Hebrew, a nes can be something that is outside of nature, but it can also be something that's just been there all along, and we have to stop to notice it. Like the burning bush that we're going to read about in a few weeks' time, which is also another kind of flaming presence that calls Moshe to stop what he's been doing and to pay attention in a different way. But miracles, the word nes, some scholars think comes from the idea of a flag or a banner, something that says, here I am, here we are, here's our flag, here's something that we're making conspicuous something that's been hidden. We're revealing something that has been unrevealed. That's part of what a miracle is. The whole idea of a miracle being an aberration of nature, and yet sometimes miracles are not aberrations of nature. The miracle is just to stop. The miracle is to take time to light the Hanukkah candles and to look at the Hanukkah candles and to see the Hanukkah candles and to allow seeing, not to sort of make us go on to the next thing. Ein lanu reshut lishtamesh bahem. We don't have permission to use them. We live in such a utilitarian world, don't we, where we want to, what is it for? What does it do? How does it work? How can we maximize? How can we maximize how many people are watching this live stream Shabbat? How can we maximize our presence on social media? How can we make sure that we get lots of likes and comments on our Facebook posts? That feels to me like the essence of a utilitarian society in the world that we live in. And Hanukkah is inviting us into something different. It's inviting us to stop and say, no, when it comes to Hanukkah, there's no using it for other purposes. Just be present with it. Just appreciate what it is and appreciate who we are and appreciate what we have, even if we want more. I know for many of us, and I'm not excluding myself from this, I like getting Hanukkah presents. I like sometimes giving Hanukkah presents, but Hanukkah's not about presents. Some of you may have read that beautiful article that our our board member and friend Yael Goldfeder wrote, that was in the Boulder Jewish News, about the holiday of enoughness, as Hanukkah is the holiday of enoughness. That's what this is saying. Ain't לנו רשות להשתמש בהם. We're just לראות אותם, להודות, להלל, לשבח, like to acknowledge, to thank, to praise, is about saying, what I have is enough. You know, the whole idea of presents, the whole culture of present giving at this time of year, when so many people in this country and throughout the world are struggling in ways that they have never struggled before, economically and in all other kinds of ways. And still there's this sort of culture of Black Friday and Cyber Monday and consume, buy, give. But it's not a kind of giving that's really about honoring what we might need in a way. And the idea of just, rather than presents, being present, is really the invitation of Hanukkah. The ultimate gift of Hanukkah, the ultimate present of Hanukkah, is the present of presence, of being able to sit either alone or with a few loved ones in front of the Hanukkah candles and just say, wow, in spite of everything, we're still here and we still have what we need. And if we're going to give anything away, let's give it to people who really need it. You know? Lahodot. Lahodot is such an interesting verb, and it connects in a way that I have been thinking that I've never thought before about how it relates to the Parsha and to the story that I read from the Chumash about Yehuda and Tamar. Because Lahodot, which is often translated as to offer thanksgiving, this last section of blessings that I just mentioned in the Amidah is about Hoda'ah, which is about thanksgiving. But it's not just about thanksgiving, it's also about acknowledgement, and it's even about confession. Because Hoda'ah is actually about confessing what I've done. And Yehuda, whose name comes from this root, Lahodot, which could mean, in the way that his mother Leah gives him the name, Odeya, I will give thanks to God. There is this sense of giving thanks in his name, but there's also the sense of someone who is willing to fess up, someone who is willing to confess what they've done. The story of Yehuda and Tamar is the first story in the Torah of someone actually admitting that they've done something wrong. He admits it. He admits that what he did with Tamar, and the fact that he didn't give her, as he had promised, his third son, and that he was the one who had slept with her thinking that she was a prostitute, is about him saying, I confess, I did it. And the name Yehuda, which, as I've said before, of course becomes Yehudi, which is the Hebrew for Jew. To be a Jew is to give thanks, and it's also to confess, and it's also to acknowledge. It's a very interesting verb group, lahodot. It can mean to thank, it can mean to acknowledge, it can mean to confess. All of them, which seem in English to be very different concepts, but they're all connected to each other in the Hebrew language. And so, in that moment, we don't have permission to use these candles, just to look at them, lahodot, so that we can acknowledge who we are, that we can be thankful, and in some ways that we can confess. Not in a heavy Yom Kippur kind of way, confessing our sins, but that we can take moments of self-reflection to say, okay, this is Hanukkah. Nowhere does it say Hanukkah's about simcha. I mean, of course, we wish each other Chag Olim Sameach, happy light festival. There's joy that pervades it, but Hanukkah's about lahodot lahalel. It's about thanksgiving, and it's really the Jewish Thanksgiving, actually. Hanukkah is really the Jewish Thanksgiving, in a sense. It's about acknowledging and thanking for the miracles. But why do I want to talk about confession? Because I feel, and I have much to confess, much to confess about this. But I think in some ways, what we're confessing is the times that we have not noticed the miracles. I think that's one of the profound lessons of Hanukkah. We sit in front of the candles, and we allow that light to fill our spirits. We allow that light to be something that connects us to our own neshama, to our own soul. We allow that light to give us a sense of thanksgiving and praise and wonder for the miracles, but we also allow it to remind ourselves of all of the times that we have not acknowledged the miracles that exist in our world and in each other and in the way we operate even through very hard times as a society and as a world. The acquisition of always wanting more, which is what the winter holidays have become in American culture, of wanting more rather than saying, I have enough. I have enough. Dai. Dayenu. I have enough. I have enough, and the enough of the simplicity of just lighting a simple candle each night, lighting and increasing that light and lighting the candles each light and allowing that to help us realize. Like I said last week, Yesh li kol, like Yaakov says, right? Yehuda's father says, Yesh li kol, I've got everything. Yesh li kol, I'm sitting in front of the Hanukkah candles. I have it all. Yeah, of course I want more. Of course there are things I want to be different in this world. But ein lanu lishtamesh lahem. I can't use the Hanukkah candles to think about what I don't have. I can use the Hanukkah candles to acknowledge what I do have. Yehuda, of course, it's a very different kind of story in his confession in that Judah and Tamar story, but I think just the fact that his name contains that word and gives us this sense of confession is very powerful. Normally when we think of the Hanukkah and its synchronicity with the cycle of Torah readings that talk about the Joseph story, there's very clear parallels that can be made between the story of Hanukkah, light in the darkness, hope where there's been fear and despair. All of that, of course, comes into the Joseph story because we see him on this journey downward. He goes into the pit, or his brothers leave him. He goes to the dungeons of Egypt, which is also uses the same Hebrew word, the bore, in the pit. He's in the pit, he's in the darkness, he's in despair, he's given up on his life perhaps. And then at the beginning of next week's Parsha, he's second in command, he's Prince of Egypt, right? But what Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out in an essay about Yehuda and Tamar is that Yehuda actually is the ancestor of a king. Joseph's just second in command to Pharaoh. So Yehuda, whose story is much less prominent than the Joseph story, he is the one, through this act of confession, through not putting Tamar to death as he'd originally wanted to do, but honoring his own mistake and her giving birth to these twins who became the ancestors of King David. He, in a sense, contributed more to the idea of some kind of salvation at the end of days than Joseph did. It's a little bit of a distraction. I didn't really want to go there as much, but just to bring it back home to this idea, this amazing idea of Ein lanu reshut lishtamesh bahem, eila lirotam bilvad. Hanukkah is about being present. Hanukkah is about being grateful. Hanukkah is about acknowledging all of the times, and do I have work to do around this? To acknowledging all of the times where I've not been grateful, to acknowledging all of the times where I've not seen the unbelievable miracles that are in front of my eyes every moment. And Hanukkah is about praising and acknowledging that there have been miracles in the past, there's miracles happening in the present, and God willing, there's going to be enormous miracles in the future. Shabbat Shalom, Happy Hanukkah, and yeah.